Okay, so let me just have this in full screen. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about strategies for teaching writing to Arab learners in an ESL/EFL context. There are many similarities, but of course the differences outweighs the similarities between the two languages. Now, one major similarity is that
Mrs. Ghada, would you please unmute your mic?
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the similarities and differences between the two languages. First of all, the similarity is that both languages have an alphabet, and phonetically, when you convert an English letter, each letter between them translates. So, for example, A, Alif, A. B is ba, so it's similar in that sense. Also, borrowing words are based on the historical and cultural factors, especially in the science realm, such as algebra, for example. So borrowing words are very common in any language, basically. So that's another similarity. However, the differences, of course, outweighs the similarities. So it's very important as an educator, as a teacher, to, when you have your audience, to make the students aware, especially if they're beginners, primary, low intermediate, make them aware of the differences between both of the languages, because some of the errors that students have is because of this L1 interference. So, for example, Arabic comes from a Semitic language family. It has 28 letters in the alphabet, as opposed to English. It comes from a Germanic language family and it has 26 letters. Arabic assigns words to gender. English, you do have that, but it's more of a neutral language. So, for example, in English, you have actor versus actress, but it's not obviously there like what we have in Arabic. In Arabic, also letters change based on their position in a sentence, while in English, the letters are fixed. Reading sometimes can become, complex for students, especially because in Arabic, we read from right to left, whereas in English, it's from left to right. Another thing that I've personally noticed from my Arab students is that students misuse articles such as a, an, and the. That's because we don't have that in Arabic. So Arab students will mistakenly use the, okay? We do have this in the we do have, but a and an, no. The, we have it as el. This is how we use it. So students might misuse it by writing the London, the Wednesday, and that is of course incorrect. This is because of the L1 interference. Also in Arabic, there's no capitalization. So we have to kind of drill that. We have to explicitly teach this capitalization and give them practice. Whereas in English, of course, we capitalize letters. In Arabic, the punctuation is limited. It's there, but it's limited. Punctuation is essential in English. So all of these differences actually interferes with students' writing. So it's very important that, okay, for example, verb to be, okay, helping verbs. I was teaching that last week, and I was explaining my students what are action verbs, what are helping verbs. We have action verbs in Arabic, but we don't have really helping verbs. So I had to drill this because it doesn't exist in the Arabic language. Can you list some difficulties facing your EFL students in writing? Can you just list this in the chat? Spelling, yeah. Run-ons, fragments. Yeah. Punctuation. Yeah. So these are really good, yeah. Capitalization, big time, because it doesn't exist. Yes, it doesn't exist in Arabic. Yeah. The use of articles, of course. That's another problem. What students do is they keep on translating, and it looks very robotic. For a teacher, you know that students translated those sentences in writing. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Lexical and grammatical collocation errors. So there was a study conducted by Mahmoud in 2005 with Arabic-speaking students majoring in English. And the findings that he saw was evidently in the essays that students were writing. So a total of 420 collocation errors were found, incorrect, 64% incorrect collocation, and 80% of these were lexical collocations as opposed to grammatical ones. Solution. So as a teacher, as an educator, if you have like students who are primary students, low intermediate or intermediate, instructors should directly teach explicitly teach grammatical rules. Okay, so students can digest that information and will be able to apply it in their writing. Include bilingual list of collocations in textbooks, and that would be very similar to what topic you're covering. And finally, offering bilingual English-Arabic or Arabic-English dictionary of collocations, especially those who are beginners. Now, this is another thing, teaching grammar and context. So Nanan, 1998 study, recommends teaching the grammar rules explicitly again. So you need to identify who are your students. You know, the audience is very important. So if they're beginners, elementary, low intermediate, or intermediate at that level, grammatical rules should be taught explicitly according to Nanan. As students progress, grammar can be taught through the exposure of reading text and speaking tasks. Okay, so when they're more advanced, you can expose them more to let's say novels, for example. MyHel L2 students should provide more advanced reading text to advanced students. So it all depends on your target students. Contextualizing the study of grammar within reading of literature and real life text had a positive impact towards students' writing. So for example, you can select a novel for extensive reading, maybe add this in the curriculum. And, you know, students can choose a theme, okay? You also should consider the level of each student, especially if you have a mixed ability class. And you can do that basically if you want to know what the level of the student is by looking back at the placement tests, looking back at the quizzes, so you can have an idea of what is more appropriate and you tailor that to the student's needs. I've conducted a research, a survey basically, and my two questions were, what are some of the writing difficulties encountered by EFL foundation students at a university in Kuwait? And what are the best strategies used to improve EFL students' academic writing skills? These were the main questions. Now, the participants were 20 foundation students, 15 females, 5 males, okay? The ages were 18 to 20 years old, so they're young adults. Sorry, okay. Their level was A2 and B1 level of writing proficiency. So that's, again, elementary, low intermediate, and intermediate levels. The detail of the proposed methodology, again, included a survey. I distributed the survey. I got 20 responses from the participants. The questionnaire included 4 sections: students' data, as I showed you in the previous slide. Okay, they're university students at a foundation level. The next part of the questionnaire, it's all closed questions. Students' attitudes and writing techniques. How can we improve your writing techniques? So they gave their attitude and thoughts towards that. The next part is patch writing and plagiarism. And finally, receiving corrective feedback to improve students' academic writing skills. So the first question was attitude towards academic English writing. 80% of the students said it was somewhat difficult. It's not very difficult. It was somewhat difficult. And so again, we have primary, low intermediate, and intermediate students found it somewhat difficult because of the L1 interference in language. 10% said very difficult, and the other 10% were very neutral. It's not difficult, it's not easy. One of the reasons why EFL Arab students seem to somewhat struggle with writing is because of their errors related to structuring sentences and organizing paragraphs, and because of the L1 interference. The next question is brainstorming and outlining. Now, what I do is I give students a topic. You give them a prompt and you tell them what genre of writing you want them to produce. So let's say it's a process essay. You want them to write a contrast piece of writing. So you introduce that very clearly to them so they understand the instructions. And then you tell them, okay, why don't we brainstorm some ideas? Now, most of the students, that's 70% of the students said, they found, that brainstorming their ideas before actually writing was very beneficial. 20% said usually, depends on the topic. 10% always, they said they had to brainstorm. McCoy is in favor of brainstorming because it makes students learn problem-solving skills, reduces their anxiety. Students have an idea about their topic, so they feel more confident before they write. This is just a sample. There are many other diagrams out there, but this is just like a bubble brainstorm sheet where students write the topic in the middle and then they can think of keywords related to the topic that they have. Now, this is about outlining, which I found quite interesting. Figure 3 shows how the respondents feel about the pre-writing stage of creating a structured outline. 50% said we never outline. If I go back to the previous slide, 70% said we must kind of brainstorm, as opposed to we never really outline. While 15% said sometimes, another 15 rarely, 10% always, and 10% usually. And that was interesting for me as a teacher to understand, okay, why don't you want to outline as a student? So brainstorming for students, again, makes them more of being a critical thinkers, reduces stress, anxiety, and brainstorming. You can basically let the student do it alone or have them in groups, depending, of course, on the topic. Now, outlining, as you can see here, this is just a sample. Ferris and Hedgecock, 2004, explain how an outline creates a hierarchical structure. This may be difficult to low intermediate and intermediate students. Now, what they do say is outlining works best when planning more complex texts, meaning you have more advanced students. For example, business reports, novels, research articles. So it works best with more advanced EFL, ESL students. Another part of the questionnaire was, do you prefer your instructor to teach you the explicit grammar rule, explicitly, you know, show the rule, and then let's see what you've learned. In this figure, 80% of the respondents find that they usually understand the grammatical rule when it's taught explicitly. Respondents also felt that they were able to apply that rule in writing, okay, when it's explicitly and clearly explained to them. Implicit grammatical correctness in writing. So 75% of the respondents sometimes understood the grammatical rules. So what I found was, if it was taught explicitly, students felt more comfortable and they knew the rule, and they were also able to write. Figure 6, most of the respondents, 60%, feel that sometimes they can apply the grammatical rule in writing when it was taught implicitly. So again, that was difficult for them, and because they're low intermediate students in a foundation level, so they leaned toward the explicit grammatical way of teaching. Explicit versus implicit grammar correctness in writing. So how do students actually apply this? For example, accuracy, correctness, and as teachers, we kind of pinpoint these errors. So most EFL students found that explicit grammar teaching is more beneficial than the implicit approach, as manifested in the results of the questionnaire. A study conducted by Cynic 2007 examined how explicit instructions of collocations greatly assisted students to improve their writing quality and using different collocations. Part 3 of the questionnaire was about patch writing and plagiarism. Now, students patch write. And when I asked them, okay, why did you, for example, took those chunks of sentences and copied it? So they say, well, it's not copied, right? It was a cross-cultural barrier for them to understand that, well, it kind of taps into plagiarism. So here, sometimes, this is the question, sometimes I copy sentences from the writing sample provided. 90% said yes, they do. And 10% said no, they like to generate their sentences. Copying sentences is plagiarized work. 95% said no, it's not plagiarized work. So this is why it's very important in the beginning of the semester and before giving the writing tasks to students to clearly show them samples of what to do, what not to do, what you can copy. This is an idea, it's just a sample, but you can't copy it. So it's very important to tackle that from the beginning. Al-Dahumi, 2017, cited Al-Banwi, explains that plagiarism amongst Saudi students to ignorance about what constitutes plagiarism and how to avoid it. So it's, again, it's a cultural thing. The education system in, for example, Saudi Arabia and in the Arab world in general, they do not emphasize on, the clear guidelines on what is to be considered plagiarized work. So this is where it's important for the teacher to explain that. That's because, number one, cross-cultural barriers from the L1 culture on what plagiarism is actually. We must give clear instructions on what plagiarized work means. Insufficient training about academic ethics and integrity and the risks of academic misconduct. So this must be clearly, for example, presented in the syllabus, drilled in before any writing activities. So this was one of my students writing, and the part where it's highlighted in red, the student copied those sentences. Okay, so it's red, it wasn't the Turnitin. So students imitate good essays, okay? And they do this not only in graded writing practice, also in the tests. So this is why it's very important to just encourage students not to do that and use their own wordings. The last part is corrective feedback. Now, the main kind of feedback is direct feedback, and it is formally known as correcting all of the grammatical errors and crossing out unnecessary words, inserting missing words, or writing the correct word form. So this is a sample. This is an essay. The teacher just crosses out the words and writes the correct word, especially in grammar. This is what the teacher does. Sample of indirect feedback. Okay, this is just a sheet I found in the British Council website. It's very good. So for example, WW means wrong word. Now the student must go back to their writing and find, okay, and find where is are the errors basically. Okay, so let's say R or question mark, it's not clear. RW, try rewriting it. So students have to actually go back, and I find direct feedback for students who are at a lower level more beneficial. But as they advance and progress, indirect feedback is also very good, especially to promote their critical thinking skills. Figure 11 shows that 90%, that's 18 respondents, prefer to receive direct feedback. Again, my students were, again, lower, at the lower levels. So 90% said, no, we want you to cross out and tell us exactly what the errors are. This shows that most of the elementary, low, intermediate, and intermediate EFL Arab students prefer to directly view the errors with the correction in place. Figure 12 demonstrates the areas of weaknesses and difficulties when receiving corrective feedback on students' writing based on correctness and content. Regarding correctness and accuracy, so 90% found that they have a problem with verb tense. Okay. Arabic does not have the past participle. This leads to failure to use and misunderstanding of the usage of the present perfect tense. So they do get confused with the verb tenses normally because it's not there in Arabic. 75% of the respondents found that punctuation and sentence structure is another area of weakness, especially when they're trying to write more complex sentences. They found that that was difficult. And where do I place the comma? That's another one. 60% found that they have capitalization errors because it's not there. Capitalization, we don't have that in Arabic. While 50% of the respondents found that they had errors related to spelling, and another 15 had problems related to the vocabulary. So again, it's important to get students exposed to reading text so they can attain those words, important words related to the topic they're writing about. Al-Khatib clarifies in his study how some problems can influence writing, such as the omission of the verb, substituting adjectives and adverbs, and misuse of the past tense. Okay. So we're done with correctness. Now I want to move on to content and generating ideas on how students organize or write their essays. 60% of the respondents found that paraphrasing was very challenging when receiving corrective feedback. So for example, when I cross that sentence and say, okay, what do you mean by that? Or add another detail. The student comes back again, I don't know what you're saying. Can you please clarify? They found paraphrasing actually difficult, while 40% found that generating ideas was difficult. Conclusion and recommendation. So English rhetorical styles for content and grammar should be explicitly taught to elementary and low intermediate as well as intermediate levels. Teach the past participle to EFL Arab students by introducing semi-controlled writing activity games and handouts. Now, when I just talked about the rhetorical styles of writing, so common academic modes of writing should be presented. According to Ferris and Hitchcock, adequate exposure of different modes of writing is crucial. So I want my students to write a differences essay. So I should project a sample and show them that this is the requirement. Okay, instead of them writing, for example, an opinion essay, I say, no, I want it to be a differences essay. So it's important that you give clear instructions. Vekinas and Isnar explain how students who were engaged with patch writing by copying sentences, but this may lead to accidental plagiarism. So students don't do that deliberately. They do it because of the, again, cross-cultural barrier. And it actually needs to be clear for them what is expected of them. Educators can also introduce other types of feedback that can include marginal comments, endnotes to keep their students motivated. I like to have one-to-one conferencing with my students. Sometimes I divide them into groups. So it's up to you, just not to make it very boring. You can use different ways. Recorded comments. I remember when we had the hybrid learning, I would always record my comments so students can hear. Electronic comments with electronic platforms such as Moodle or Blackboard. So there's a feature where you can record your voice if it's easier for you. And just for example, okay, sentence one or topic sentence, then explain what is required of the student. Quick marks. This is a nice feature, but it's called also it follows the indirect way of feedback. For example, C, S, comma, splice. So students should have a list to give those definitions instead of them wondering, okay, what is CS? What does vague mean? Maybe they will ask those questions. These are my references. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just going to open the chat.
Yes, please type your questions in the chat box. This paper will be published in about a week. We will have published the conference proceedings, and a link to it will be on the Tesol Kuwait website, and it will have an ISSN number. Thank you for asking about that. Okay, Ms. Ghada, they're asking, can writing be done in groups?
Peer editing, it's good to have that, but the problem with writing in groups is that they copy each other's sentences. We go back to the patch writing issue. So it really depends on how well they understand what plagiarism is. I like them to do that when they have different topics. For example, we have 4 students with different topics, they can do that. But if it's the same topic, they most probably are going to end up copying each other's, sentences. So I wouldn't recommend this unless it's carefully monitored. It's in Turnitin, the voice recording. So it's in Turnitin. You just double click and then there's like a drop down menu and you will find it there.
Okay, another question. What activities and resources do you, I've lost my thing. What activities and resources do you recommend for increasing learners' vocabulary knowledge?
So for vocabulary, what I do like them to do is extensive reading. I do really focus on reading. They choose a novel, they read, they highlight. This is very important. Self-taught, for example. And then you can provide them with a list of questions and have those fruitful conversations. In groups, for example, if they have different novels or different reading texts, it can be a bit confusing because you want everybody to participate with one topic. It depends on your time limit. So this is how I like my students to add up to their vocabulary or word list.
Next question. Can you give your point of view if the use of technology affects the learning of writing of English as a foreign language or a second language learner?
It does, especially in spelling. So I had students, for example, I see their graded writing practice where they type it and there's no spelling error because you have the autocorrect spell checker. But when they begin writing, there's a lot of spelling mistakes. So we kind of need to balance paper-based writing with technology so their spelling can improve. So this is what I see with my students all the time.
Okay, next question. What can be the best and easiest way to make them understand cohesion through activities?
So you can use gap information. Okay, for example, are we talking about writing? So it depends what you're referring to. So let's say writing, gap information. So last week, for example, I had a paragraph and I chopped off the topic sentence, the body, the concluding sentence, for example. And each group I told them, okay, can you arrange that? And when they're done, I project the actual paragraph. Also with signal word activities, especially if you have a process genre of writing.
Okay, the next one. What about gamification to teach grammar and writing?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one, especially if you have younger students, they would enjoy that. Yeah, and it all depends on your time in class. So you can have that as a warm-up activity just to get them going. They enjoy that. Useful applications such as Quizlets. Students love that. Yeah.
Next question. What is the best way to stop ghostwriting?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'll tell you how I catch them. I compare their time-based writing, okay, to the one that's, let's say, the graded practice where you give them a long time, and then I compare. And this is how I find out. Another way is the lockdown browsers such as Safe Exam Browser. You can use that. If it's paper-based and you want to give them a week, for example, you can take back the paper and sign your name on it so they don't add new ideas that someone else would write. So there's different ways to go around through that. Yeah.
Next question. How can you find out if a student's writing is memorized rather than produced spontaneously, and how to deal with this issue?
Well, you will know the student based on other skill area activities. For example, let's say the writing is perfect, okay, and then the speaking is, it's not so good. It's not, you know, words are not said in a smooth way. So you would know. So again, giving clear instructions about that is very important. This is how I deal with it. You would know your students.
Okay. I'm sorry, do I need to read that again?
I don't know. I didn't hear. Yeah.
What are some writing activities that we can do with our classes that are less than 3 minutes?
Sentence-based, paragraph-based, okay? Topics that are simple, very simple. They can identify with, like, let's say, health and fitness. These are very easy topics that they can write about. 3 sentences, 4 sentences, and the topics must be very easy for them. Food, health and fitness, pets, for example, hobbies. So yeah, I think it's manageable in a few minutes. They can do that. Yeah.
Here is a question for me. How do you get attendance certificates? You don't get it for today. You have to attend 4 sessions. That could be 1 today, 3 tomorrow, 4 today, none tomorrow. They will be given during the closing ceremony. If you are in Kuwait, you have to be physically present at Kuwait Technical College to receive your certificate. Otherwise, there will be a QR code to get it, okay? Thank you. Now let me go to the next question. Is it advised to teach grammar rules explicitly, no matter what level, taking into cognizance that English is a dynamic language and that students can get stuck in these rules? Secondly, do you think it is better to teach grammar points or to teach grammar through writing?
Okay, I see what you're saying. You can do that, absolutely. Especially if they forget the rules, it's important, even if they're advanced, it's important to explicitly teach that to them. I do that as well. So that's fine. But usually, based on studies, it's more advisable to teach grammar explicitly for lower level students.
Okay, see, are students given class time to write?
Yes, because we're confined with a curriculum and a time and other topics to talk about other skill areas to improve on. So I think giving a time is very important. Yeah.
Okay, next question. How do you deal with correct syntax problems in the sentences?
I point them out and I let students rewrite again. For example, I pair students up, weaker students with stronger students, just to save time. So this is one way of doing it. There are, of course, other ways. Yeah.
Then we have a question. Do you think an AI app like ChatGPT would hinder student writing competence as it provides a non-plagiarized content?
Well, it's good because, you know, they gain all that knowledge, but the problem is it really applicable when we have exams? Can they actually process all this information and then write it down? So I think there's a gap. I think there's a gap when they do use these kinds of applications.
Okay, another question from Amani. Do you recommend directed writing where an outline is given to foundation college students, or should they write freely with minimal direction?
So based on study, students must be given some kind of brainstorming sheet or an outline. So for me, I've tried brainstorming. It saves more time. Outlining is very good, but I found again that students prefer to use their brainstorming sheets in tests because of the time, and then the outline. That's why sometimes they, you know, they do just half of it and then they start writing their essays. If it's more of a complex text, okay, research, long, for example, writing a story, yeah, they do need an outline.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Ghada. It was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
If you are in Kuwait tomorrow, you are expected to come to Kuwait Technical College for the presentations and to be part of the closing ceremony so that you can receive your certificate physically. Those who are outside of Kuwait, there will be a QR code for you. Now, I'm trying to remember, there was another thing that I wanted to say and I can't remember. Oh, yes, this presentation will be available as a video. Hopefully in a week, it will be posted or less, be posted to our Tesol Kuwait page on the conference thing. It will replace the Zoom link with a link to listen to the presentation. Also, the video will be uploaded to our YouTube thing. And in a week, we hope, inshallah, to have published the conference proceedings. and there will be a link so that you can access the different papers. Thank you so much. I really hope that you are, don't worry if you're Kuwaiti but you're outside, you can't be here. You cannot teleport yourself, so don't worry about that. Okay, have a very good day. Again, thank you so much, Mrs. Ghada.
Thank you. Thank you.